My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Friday, May 6, 2016, and I'm in Higgins, Texas to interview Duane Jenkins for the Cowboys in Every County Oral History Project. And we're with Duane because he's representing Ellis County, Oklahoma today. Duane, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
You're welcome.
Let's learn a little bit more about you. Could you tell me the year you were born and where you were born?
Well, I was born in 1934 at Shattuck, Oklahoma. And, of course, my parents were farm people, so from north of Shattuck. And this was right in the middle of the Dust Bowl time. And so they tell me, I don't remember it, but they tell me that I had dust pneumonia before I was a year old. But I recovered. And so that's where I grew up, north of Shattuck. Attended school in two different rural one-room schoolhouses before we transferred into Shattuck when I was in the 4th grade. And basically that's about it, I guess.
Tell me a little bit about your parents.
My dad was born in 1908. His parents came to Ellis County and filed in the free land deal, built a sod house, that during that era, and my dad was born there the year after they moved there, the year after statehood, 1907, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where he was born and raised. My mom was born in Iowa, and her parents moved to Ellis County, Oklahoma when she was a year old. And so they basically were what I like to think of as that age of folks were the first white kids that grew up in this part of Oklahoma. Because prior to that, no state, it was Indian land, and
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know what they thought about that, but I sure have. And then went to school at Shattuck and graduated in 1952. And then had no question in my mind, but went to school or college at Oklahoma A&M at that time. And the year I graduated, 1956, was the last year for Oklahoma A&M. Became OSU, Oklahoma State University.
Well, I'm going to take you back to your time going to school in Shattuck. Describe the school for me.
Well, the kids that were there came from all directions of town. I don't know what the enrollment might have been, 150, 200, I don't know. They had a good program as far as I can think looking back. And of course, my brother and I rode a school bus, so that was a part of it. And I don't know what else to say about the school. It's still in operation. They have a brand new facility now. It's quite a progressive school. And
What did your parents do for a living?
what's that?
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was a farmer.
Okay.
Yeah. Farmed, and in that particular era, a lot of farm people made their living by milking cows, separating the milk, selling the cream, feeding the skim milk to hogs and calves. That was their cash turnover every week, so that they could buy groceries. These were pretty hard times.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when we got REA electricity in 1948, I believe it was. They told us that the monthly charge was going to be, I think it's $3 a month. And my dad said, "I've seen the time I couldn't pay that." Now, he was hesitant about, but he went ahead, of course. And I don't think we ever missed a payment. But that's kind of the way I was raised up, as an after fact of the Depression days.
Mm-hmm.
So money was tight, and everybody worked. And, I think I started milking cows at 5 years old, and a lot of people did not go that direction. But anyway, that's what it was in my family.
Well, I was going to ask about your farm chores because, you know, if you're riding the school bus, are you doing chores before the bus?
Oh yes, we'd get up about 5 o'clock. Dad would stick his head in the door and, all right, boys, time to get up. And so we'd pile out and go out and milk and feed calves and hogs, be ready for the school bus. I think it came about 7:45 or something like that. And we had to have the chores done or breakfast by the time that school bus came. And that was 7 days a week. And I remember my dad saying one time, when we got a little older in high school running around, he said, if you can't run around all night, get up next morning at 5 o'clock and do chores, you stay home. And that's just about the way it was, too. So there was a lot of work done then was more hand labor, more time consuming than it is now. Like putting up hay, you know, it had to be cut with a binder, and then it had to be shocked, then it had to be hauled in, and so, I remember Thanksgiving vacation, we nearly always were hauling hay. And kids in town that were raised up in town, they'd say, boy, you get off 2 or 3 days for Thanksgiving. They're going to have all that fun. We said, yeah, we know about that. We're going to be hauling hay. But that's just the way it was, and you know, I don't have any regrets for the way I grew up, of course.
Did you just have the one brother?
Had a brother a year and a half older than I. Then we had a sister come along 12 years younger than I.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my brother and I were pretty well through school and out before she started school.
Mm-hmm. Were you involved with FFA?
Oh yes, I think 1948, I went in at high school as a freshman, and my brother had already been in there 1 year. And between us and whatever, that's what directed us into getting in the Angus business. It runs clear back to that time. We both decided we wanted to get an Angus show steer, which at that time you bought a small calf, brought him home, put him on a nurse cow, and you know you started from a baby calf. They don't do that today, but so there was an Angus breeder at Perryton, Texas, which was about 60 miles west of us. And you know, I think back about that. At that time, we didn't have a telephone, so instead of calling and making kind of an appointment to go look at his cattle, we just got in the car and went. And fortunately, caught him at home. And so we ended up buying 2 little steers to make show steers out of. And I've told this many times, we were in a 38 Chevrolet car, we didn't have a pickup. And so my brother held one calf in front of him in the back seat, floorboard, and I held the other one. And that's the way we brought him home. Put a gunny sack on him to catch the main stuff. But and so we hadn't had these show steers very long till we both decided we wanted to get a heifer. And so we went back out to same place, and each one of us bought a heifer calf. And that was our start at the Angus cattle, right there. Then later, we bought a bred cow. Well, I guess there was already a cow with a calf, young heifer, over further eastern Oklahoma, and brought them home. And then, in about a year later, we bought 16 head of heifers up at Goodland, Kansas. Brought them home. Of course, we split them half and half. Everything my brother and I did was a 50-50, you know. And so that was our start of the Angus cattle, and really our cattle breeding today mostly runs back to those heifers we bought there in late 1940, 48, 49. I think I did buy 3 other heifers in 1957, but that's the last outside blood that I brought in through the females. And of course we use AI bulls, that come along later. But so does that answer your question?
Yes. Well, with FFA, did you spend any time, did you end up going up to Stillwater while you were still in high school?
Oh yeah, we went to all the contests and interscholastics, you know. And by the way, in 1952, the year I was a senior, I showed a steer every year, besides the heifers, and more or less locally. You know, we didn't think about going to Fort Worth or some big place. But I had the reserve grand champion steer in Oklahoma City in 1952, an Angus. And at that time, it was almost unheard of because the Herefords pretty well topped all the shows. And when the night they sold these animals, Governor Johnson Murray was the governor, and he auctioned off the 2 top steers. The heifer from a girl down at Sarah, Oklahoma, had the grand champion steer, which was a Hereford. And then I had the reserve brand, which was an Angus. And so when they sold the Hereford steer, and when I let my steer in, Governor Murray said, "Well, here comes a black angel from Hereford heaven." And of course he brought at that time a fabulous price, $1.80 a pound, I think, something like that. And so that was big time. Yeah.
Well, as you're finishing up your high school years at Shattuck, were your parents very encouraging of you continuing your education?
Oh yeah, and my dad very encouraging in helping us boys get these Angus cattle. He didn't want to fool with the registered cattle himself. He had some commercial cows, but he was very instrumental in. Well, we're in school, and so he and another guy would take off in the truck, and they'd try to find these cattle that might be for sale someplace. You did a lot of driving, yeah. They were very much interested in us going on to college. My dad had a 8th grade education. My mom, I think, went 10 years, a sophomore in high school when they got married. So, yeah. Education was important to them.
So at that time, why did you decide to attend Oklahoma A&M? What motivated you?
I don't know. I never had any other inclination or any other place that attracted me. That's the place where he had been, I suppose, through the FFA participation. So we were familiar with it, and knew some other students had went over there prior to our time.
And did your brother go over there with you?
Yeah, he went 2 years. He went a year before me. A year ahead of me. And well, so in 1952, when I graduated from high school, was going to go to A&M. Well, about the time we got settled in school, the drought of the 50s hit this area. And my dad said, "You guys got these cows." He said, "We're going to have to do something because your cows are crowding my cows." And so we decided somewhere or other in the discussing the thing that we'd try to find some grass to lease around Stillwater so that we could move our cows over there. Could not find anything for lease, but we did find a place for sale. I don't know if you ever heard the name John Houck. He was College Bazaar there on campus at that time. And through a realtor, we found out that his brothers and sisters, an estate, was wanting to sell this 280 acres out north and west of Stillwater. Well, it was either knuckle up and borrow the money and buy that, or the other alternative was to sell the cattle. And the price had just hit bottom. We'd given $300 a piece for these heifers, and if we'd have stuck them in a sale barn, you know, they'd have brought $60 a head. So we did go ahead and buy the place, and my dad was responsible for half of it, and my brother and I the other half. And so that's the way I run cattle over there the whole time I was in college.
How many head?
Oh, my brother and I probably had 25 to 30 head of cows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we learned a hard lesson or two. The first fall, when we pulled the calves off the cows, we had no place to go with them. So we borrowed my dad's truck, went to Oklahoma City to the stockyards. And when we pulled up to the line, I don't know if you're familiar with the stockyards area, but we started on 28th Avenue. I don't know how far that is from the stockyards, but it's a long ways. And we sat there until 2 o'clock the next morning before we finally got unloaded.
Mm.
And we had nothing to do except, at that time they didn't have an auction market. You consigned them to a commission company, and they took it from there. So we went back to Stillwater, left the calves there, fresh pulled off the cows, shrinking, balling. And they didn't sell till Tuesday. And I think the pay weight was like 390 pounds at 11 cents a pound. They fairly brought $40 a piece. So we were pretty blue about that. And so, you know, we just tightened the belt a little tighter and made things work. So that's kind of the way that was a pretty good lesson right there. You never, hindsight's always better than your foresight. If we'd have hung on to them and brought them back out this way, in about 2 weeks they had a rain out in the Panhandle. Wheat pasture kind of became available, and a guy pulled in my dad's yard and gave him 15 cents for his calves, about 4 cents a pound more than ours. Which today, that's, you know, but that was about the going price, 15, 16 cents a pound. And now we're talking about, you know, $2 or whatever.
Well, backing up a little bit, when you decided to go to A&M, how did you get there?
Well, like I said, my brother and I did everything pretty well together, so we bought a car together.
What kind of car?
48 Chevrolet. And I forget what we gave for it. $800 runs in my mind, but I don't know. But we had transportation back and forth.
Okay.
And then the Army drafted him right after he finished his sophomore year, so he'd gone to the Army, and of course left the car, and I continued to use the car until, well, that's what we did our courting in, wasn't it?
There you go.
So, anyway, we did have some transportation.
Where did you live in town when you got there?
Stillwater?
Uh-huh.
The realtor that we bought the place through also had rental property in town, and so there's a little 2-room house down on I think it was on 7th Street, or where 51 Highway comes in, that main little junction there. It was a block off of that, next to a little park area.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was 2 other guys in my same class, and we talked them into going in with us, and the 4 of us rented that house for $40 a month, $10 a piece a month. And we did our own cooking basically, and you know, of course we'd take food over from home, and they would too, and you know, it was just a time when none of us had any money, you know, to speak of. We just kind of got by as cheap as we could. Well, also, for a freshman to not live on campus in a dorm took some special. Anyway, you had to really work to get that. So my dad stood up for us for that. He said, these boys have these cows to watch over here. They got horses, and they got saddles, and they need feed. So they need a place to put their gear and everything. And whoever the one in charge of that in the college told him, okay, if you'll vouch for them, we'll let them do this. You know, it was a special deal. So we did. We kept saddles, and we'd buy a ton of cake and put it back here in the bedroom. And because the land that we bought had no improvements on it.
Mm-hmm.
We finally built a shed out there to put hay under and store a little cake, but just enough to kind of get by, you know. So we batched in that little old house, 4 of us, and one week we kind of paired off. So one week these 2 guys would be the cooks, the other 2 would be the dishwasher, and then next week we'd change. They'd be the cook, we'd be the dishwasher. It was quite different than it is today, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you came to A&M, what were you studying?
Animal science, yeah.
Okay. So,
well, they called it animal husbandry, AH. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about some of the professors or classes you remember that stick out in your mind.
Well, in the animal science department, Bob Tadashek, it was probably his second year being on staff, and another one was Joe Whiteman. Well, I can't think of some of the those are 2 main ones, I guess, that were teaching classes that I was involved in. Then after 2 years, I was really getting pretty dissatisfied in college. I came home and I told my dad, I said, I'm not going back, I'm not going to continue college. Well, the drought had just got more severe continually. So he said, well, I'll tell you this, there's not much going on here. Wheat crop was absolute failure, and government was shipping in hay that you could get at a reduced price to keep your cattle going. He said, you better just go find you something you can get a job with. So I had a good ag teacher, and he probably, well, I know he influenced me quite a bit. And so I went back over on campus, walked into Whitehurst Hall, and Mr. Orr was head of the department. And I went in and visited him and enrolled in ag education. And when I walked out there, it was like a weight off my shoulders, because I knew in 2 years I could go out there and get a job with a paycheck. So that's how that ended up. Got my degree in ag education, graduated in '52, came back out home. We were going to get married in June, and I had interviewed 2 or 3 places, but no response, or maybe I didn't like it either. But anyway, I found out that it's Fargo, Oklahoma, which was about 25 miles across the country from where my folks lived, that job had opened up. And so I called the district supervisor and asked him, is it okay if I go interview for that job? He said, sure. And so I went over there, and I was hired as ag teacher. And we lived there 9 years, and I was ag teacher there. And of course, all this time I maintained my cattle. When I moved them from Stillwater back to Ellis County, things were looking better, but a long ways from the drought being over, this would be in the fall of 56. I found out about some land that had no cattle on it for the last year. An old fellow had owned the land, and so I went to see him about leasing it, and I could never get a yes or no answer. And I believe I went to see him 5 or 6 times before I finally convinced him to lease me that grass. So then I hired a truck and hauled the cattle back out to Ellis County and made that work. And now I forget where I was going with all that. But,
So you had your cattle still, and you were teaching ag ed in Fargo.
yeah, right.
Okay. Well, let's back up a quick second and tell me how you met your wife.
Had a little barn dance at our place. They were 4 or 5 boys in our area north of Shattuck that we'd been friends since the beginning. Our parents knew each other, and so anyway, as we got up into high school, we started having. They'd have a little barn dance, once, and we'd have a little barn dance at our place. We'd do a little square dancing, round dancing, and just have a party. And of course, most of us would get a date, and bring the girls too. And our parents, they joined right in. They liked it too. So anyway, a good friend of mine that I'd known all of her life brought her as a date one time, and so that's how I got acquainted with her. And then when I'm a sophomore, at the beginning of the junior year, she came over from Laverne. She graduated Laverne High School. Came over as a freshman. Well, girls then, most of them didn't have a car. So I was available to haul her back and forth, Stillwater, Shattuck, and Laverne. And they had a square dance club going there in Stout Hall, where she lived, over on campus. And I was going to square dance, so, things just kind of worked out in the right direction. And she chased me until she caught me. So I guess we were engaged maybe a year before we got married. And got married then in June 24th, 56. Okay.
Get it right now.
Get it right, yeah. So, by the way, that'll be 60 years this June 24th.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Did you make her work your cattle?
Did I what?
Did you make her work your cattle?
Yeah. Yeah. She was raised up in town. Laverne's not a very big town, but still, she'd never been a farm girl. And so when we came down here, she had to have had a lot of faith in me, because I put her where she hadn't been before.
Well, you were in Fargo for a little bit. You didn't stay there. Where did you go after Fargo?
We stayed there 9 years.
Okay.
Yeah, until I quit. When I found this place and bought it, that's when I left the ag teaching.
Okay. Now I want you to tell me about this place and where we are in terms of geography.
Okay. Well, I'll back up just a little bit. Probably the last half of the time I spent at Fargo ag teaching, I enjoyed very much. But I still had cattle on the side, and I always had this desire to get full-time cattle farming operation. And so we went different places looking at land that I'd seen advertised for sale. We drove clear to Pawhuska, Oklahoma one time. Drove by the place and never got out. Turned around and come back home. I didn't like what I was seeing. And of course, finances, it was a big problem. I talked to 2 or 3 different lending agencies. They would loan you maybe 50% of the appraised value, which they never appraised it as high as the asking price. So I was up against the wall there, but I still kept looking. And I saw this place advertised in the little old advertising section of our county, the Shattuck paper. And I said, I'm going to go down and look at that. 943 acres. Well, we had 3 boys that time, and the last of them was just a baby. She said, well, you go look at it. I'm tired of running around looking at all these places. Said, you go ahead and look at it, and you come back and tell me what you see. So I came down here and never had met the folks before, and had never been in this area before, and knocked on the door and come in, and we visited, and of course told them I'd seen the ad about the place being for sale, and so after drinking tea and eating cookies, he and I got in a pickup and drove around for to see everything, and of course it attracted me right off. We came back and we came back to the house, and I said, well, I appreciate your time and I really enjoyed it and everything, but I said, I'd be honest with you, I don't think I can borrow the money. I can't even pay the down payment. He said, well, my wife and I, we'd be interested in carrying the note on. And that's when my eyes, I guess, probably bugged out, and my brain started cranking, and before I left here, I asked him if he would hold the place, let me, see what I could do, and he held the place open for a week or whatever our time that was, and of course I told her about it, and everything just went from there, and we ended up signing a note with them for 15 years to be paid off in semi-annual payments, be 30 payments in 15 years. And it looked impossible. Went to my banker. I'd already been to my banker and told him kind of what I was looking at, and he encouraged me. He said, we'll help you all we can. And so, make a long story short, we made the deal, and when school was out, we moved down here and went to work. And in 15 years, wrote the last check on the note. It was paid off. So the place had a little irrigation system up here where you could water alfalfa, you could water wheat, milo. It was all hand moved pipe. But I could see in my mind if that would give me some security of being able to make a crop, through the dry weather. It didn't protect you from hail. But I asked him, I said, well, how often do you get a hail down here? Well, he said, I think only one time that I ever had a bad hailstorm. So I didn't carry any insurance. I just went after it. The good Lord was with us, and we made the thing work. What else to add there?
Well, where are we? We're kind of in an interesting place. We're not too far from Oklahoma.
Like I say, I had never been down here before and really had not paid any attention to the location. Originally, the state line was thought to be out here at the road, County Road 30. But in 1929, I believe it was, I think Texas pushed the deal, maybe more than Oklahoma, but it was also the 100 meridian. So I'm told the only way they could really be, at that time, be accurate was to have a guy survey it at night using the stars. Of course, now they have all this other improved. But that's the way they located that line, and it moved it over, at this point, a little over a quarter of a mile into Oklahoma. And of course, we didn't live here, but if you had lived here or owned this property at that time, Texas took the property, then they issued patents. And for $1 an acre, you could buy that patent back. You already owned it, but you had to pay $1 an acre to. Now this is 1929. $1 was, you know, pretty good amount.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way it all happened, and I was totally unaware of it. My attorney picked that up when he was running the abstracts, and so he told me. He said, I've talked to whoever in Austin about the thing, and the fact there's a little over 6 acres down here in the middle of everything that whoever owned that property at that time, I think it stuck over the end of an 80, whoever owned that didn't live close and failed to buy the patent back on that 6 acres. But the state of Texas told my attorney, said, if Texas ever issues patents again, which, you know, I doubt really if they ever will, but whoever owns this property around it will have the option of buying that for whatever price. So that was kind of a different, strange kind of a deal. But I had an attorney in Shattuck that that kind of grew up knowing and had a lot of faith in him, and he was pretty sharp cookie. And with him handling my abstract work and everything, I felt confident that everything was, you know, going to be done the right way, and apparently it was. So we're right in the middle. They designated this as the Oklahoma Strip of Texas, OS, and then it'll have a number, OS 78 or OS 77. And it runs this full length of this vertical line to the state line. And it has separate. I mean, they separated in the history of the place, abstract and so forth. This is all separated off of where it was originally. That was section 29, Oklahoma, but after that it was Oklahoma Strip, such and such a number. So kind of a different situation. It's been no real problem. I mean, you pay taxes in Texas and you pay taxes in Oklahoma. One fellow that I knew who he's a little older than me, and he told us, he said, well, now if you were smart, thinking ahead where your boys might go to school, college, he said you'd probably ought to move that house over into Oklahoma if you prefer Oklahoma State, which we did, of course. But we didn't do that. I mean, that was going to be a major thing.
Did your sons have to pay out-of-state tuition?
On the boys, yeah, they paid out-of-state tuition.
Wow.
Yeah. Now they have a way of getting.
Yeah.
Our third son did more in FFA work in Texas, more familiar with, you know, things. And he said, I'm not going to pay out-of-state tuition to go to OSU. So he went to Texas Tech, which is a good school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, he was, this is a little side note, but he was the mask writer at Texas Tech in about 1987 or 8. And it was a year of a sesquicentennial for Texas. What's that, 175 years? Is that and he pulled that horse and trailer and appeared in, I think, over 100 appearances, little town rodeos and parades and all this sort of thing. He had a good time as the masked rider.
Wow. Well, since we're talking about your sons, why don't you tell me a little more about them?
our oldest son, David, started the college in Panhandle State at Goodwill.
Mhm.
Went 2 years there, and then he transferred to Oklahoma State. He double majored in animal science and ag education, I think, and then he got his master's in ag education. But he never did teach. He didn't really decide he didn't really want to go that direction. So I see, he went to work for the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association, and I think was in that position 2 or 3 years. Then he was hired by OSU, assistant to the, I think he was assistant to the assistant director of animal science, or I can't remember exactly the terminology or the name of the guy that he served under, but he worked for OSU for about 3 or 4 years, primarily advising students when they graduated, diplomatic things, just different things that he did. Then he felt a call to the ministry, and so he went to seminary in Kentucky and has been a Methodist pastor for close to 30 years now, I guess, probably. His wife is a daughter of Jim Key on the Ag Ed department at OSU. David became a fiddle player, and he played for some occasion over there, and Jim Key said, "David, I have a daughter that plays the violin. You want to meet her?" So they invited him out for supper, and they hit it off, and they ended up getting married. So he's a fiddle player, she's a violinist. He's converted her pretty much to the fiddle playing. And they have 2 children. Our only grandson, Will, who's graduated just last week from ORU. And then they have a daughter that's a senior in high school at Medford, Oklahoma right now. The second son, Dale, also went to Panhandle State a couple of years, then transferred to OSU, graduated in animal science. And when he graduated, and he kind of come back home, and we was trying to, and David was in on that too, trying to get him to interview for some different jobs, and he just wasn't too interested in anything. But he made the remark, said, "Well, Dad, if you had room for me back here," he said, I guess I'd like to come back here and work." Well, I said, "Well, okay, probably that'd work." But I said, "I'll tell you this, you'll never have a dime in your pocket to spend foolishly, and you'll always have lots of more work to do than you can get done." I guess I didn't scare him off, because here he came. And then he married a girl from Higgins, and so he's been, they've only been living here in this house. They moved that house here about 5 years ago. Prior to that, they lived in Higgins, and they lived in Canadian, and he was full-time youth director in the church at Canadian for several years, up until about 6, 7 years ago, maybe. But we're not partners in with our cattle. He has his cattle, I have mine, but we handle them the same and use the same sires, and we started our sale in 1997, and built a sale barn, and he's just been with us now for so long. And we get along real good and work together, and it's been good. And they have 4 daughters, and now 2 of those daughters have sons born 12 days apart,
Wow.
about a year ago. So we have great grandsons. that'll be a year old in about another month. Then a third boy, then he was a year old when we moved down here, so he doesn't remember anything else other than that. And like I mentioned a while ago, he decided to go to Texas Tech because he had been involved in FFA things in Texas. Higgins did not have FFA and VOAG until about the time he come into high school. In fact, he was president of the FFA as a freshman the very first year, because that was the first year they had, which was kind of unusual. But anyway, he graduated. He went to Texas Tech. I think he had a double major in animal science and ag education as well. Caprock Feedlot Industries hired him. What they called a management trainee program. In Caprock Feedlot Industries, they have about 5 or 6 huge feedlots, and his job, he was to serve in the leadership of all the different categories of the feedlot, all the way from buying and selling grain and feed, to buying and selling cattle, reading feed bunks. They had in veterinary medicine part. They would work in that area for a while, so they would know firsthand all the different parts of operating a feedlot. And he got along real good at that. I think he worked for Caprock about 5 years. He met Jackie, his wife, at Texas Tech. Her father was a cotton farmer, and so the feedlot thing, it was all right, but it was a lot of hard work and hours, and so he had an opportunity to go into cotton farming with her dad and brother, and probably farmed cotton on his own 2-3 years. Cotton prices were terrible. He was losing money faster than he could make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he quit that and taught VOAG for, I think, 5 or 6 years. And he had worked with, they live at a town called Turkey, Texas. And halfway between Turkey and Silverton is a school where the two towns went together, and they call it Valley Schools. So his wife, she's been a teacher all these years, and she had got the job of teaching at Valley. Well, through working with the FFA, he became acquainted with the son of a cotton gin owner. And this cotton gin was a family operation, the father and the mother and the son. And the mother was the bookkeeper, which is in cotton farming, cotton gin operation, a lot of book work, tremendous amount. And she was having trouble with her eyes, and she told the dad one day, she said, it's just about to get the best of me. He said, you're going to have to do something different. So they talked it over between them and decided they would hire somebody to replace her. And the son had traveled and worked with Daniel in the FFA work, and he said, well, I know the guy we need. So they hired him, and it's been really a well-paying job, and he's been with them now probably 15 years, I don't know. And then just recently, in the last year, the guy decided to sell the business, so he sold to another company, and they bought the business with the idea of Daniel staying on as manager of that. So he's now the manager of that cotton gin. And their daughters, had 2 daughters. Both of them have went to Texas Tech. One of them's married now, and she is one of the first women be involved in what you would call a oil landman, mineral rights, leasing mineral rights. They have a special training program there at Texas Tech, brand new, and she was one of the first ones to go through that. So now she's married and lives in Midland, Texas, right in the middle of the oil patch.
Uh-huh.
And the other girl is doing her master's work in, I guess it'd be bookkeeping sort of work. And I think she already has a job waiting for her when she completes her degree. So I guess that kind of gives a rundown of the 3 sons and their families.
Well, coming back to what you do here, tell me about the name of your ranch and how you came up with it.
Okay. There's a creek that starts in the section north of us, the drainage, and it becomes a creek at our line over in Oklahoma. Well, about where Texas and Oklahoma line is. Anyways, it goes down through the place. It becomes, live water at one point during wet times, and then other times it's dry. But at the bottom end of our property line, it's spring fed, and the fellow that owned the place before me had built 2 ponds over to the side of the creek and put a concrete dam in so that it backed water around and give a supply for irrigating. Anyway, that creek is called Little Robe Creek, named after a Cheyenne Indian chief. And in Oklahoma, in the county, the townships within the county have names, and this is Little Robe Township, however big that is, and named after the creek, named after the Indian. Mm-hmm. And so, well, we started thinking, or I did, I guess. My brother's in Angus Business, and they pretty well go by just Jenkins Angus, and so I wanted something different. So the logical thing was to name it after Little Robe, so that's how we come up with that name. The original way the name was written was 2 different words, Little Robe. Well, when you're registering cattle, if you use that as a prefix part of the name, you put them together and do away with 1 space. You're allowed 28 spaces on a name, so that's the reason I did that. And we just 1 word, Little Robe. And that name, that word, I've had people, for some reason, robe is hard, maybe to detect from rope. Uh-huh. And one time we had they put rove, R-O-V-E. Of course, it's R-O-B-E. I didn't even think about that when we started that. But we've had that name long enough now. Practically ever since we moved here, we did. And I've had a lot of people ask me, well, where did you come up with the name Little Robe? Mm-hmm. So it came from the Cheyenne Indian, which that's another history of itself. Yeah.
Do you have a brand you use?
Yes, double bar, like an equal sign, 2 bars, J, and excuse me. Well, my dad's brand was J bar X. And the natural thing to do was to leave my brother continue that brand, so I had to come up with something. So double bar J became the brand. Yeah. And we register a brand in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, it's a statewide registration. In Texas, you register by county. And you could be registered in Hemphill County, and if somebody in Lipscomb County wanted to use that same brand, they could, if you're not already registered there. So I'm registered in Hemphill County and Lipscomb County in Oklahoma through Ellis County. Yeah, we brand, that's just a given, that you put a brand on for identification, ownership.
Well, how has the Angus business changed from the time you started when you were young till today?
Oh, yeah, it is. When I started, like in the late 40s, typically they were after the smaller, shorter kind of cattle. And that kind of got them in trouble because the dwarf factor showed up in that county at that time. So when we were buying these original heifers that we bought, many people that were already in the business, that's the kind of cattle they wanted to keep, was those kind of shorty cattle. So we got the ones that was a little longer and taller that they didn't think they wanted. Well, it turned out that was more nearly right than the ones they were keeping, so we lucked out there. But we had to kind of watch that, the shorter kind of cattle. It all sounded good, but when it's still pounds that you sell. And so if that cow's winning a calf 450 pounds, and here's another one winning a calf at 650 pounds, or even 550, that's just that many dollars more from your product. And some of the cattle, some of those heifers we bought, they were weaning calves, lighter than the others comparatively. And Oklahoma came out with the Oklahoma Beef Improvement Program, OBCIP, I think it was, along about, I'm going to say 59 or 60, 59, 58, somewhere in there. So we enrolled our cattle in OBCIP, and really about the only thing you did was, at somewhere about weaning time, 205 days of age, you'd weigh these calves and adjust them to where they were all on the same basis, and then those in the lower winning weight area, you'd tend to cull those mamas out, and that. So we did that, and then about that time, everybody's kind of, well, not everybody, but a lot of folks were seeing this, and so the Angus Association started the AHIR, Angus Herd Improvement Records, and so we were with the Oklahoma beef part, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years, and then since we were in the Angus deal, we just transferred, dropped the Oklahoma part and did our weighing and so forth records with the Angus Association, with the AHIR program. And along about that same time, they also started recording yearling weights and adjusting them. So that gave you a pretty good idea where this calf weighed off at, and then how well he kept growing past that weaning time, past the time he's on the cow. So that was a big step, and that helped the breed. And I can't say enough good things about the Angus Association. The board of directors that they have had, and the foresight they have had in helping the breed to kind of be where it ought to be, some guidance, some direction to go there. But still, even at that point, of course, if you was out buying cattle, what you saw is what you got. I mean, you had nothing else to go by. So it's kind of a trial and error thing, and for example, if I needed to buy a new bull, I'd go buy a yearling bull, which I bought some of those out of bull tests down at Tishomingo, Holdenville. And first thing I'd do, of course, here's this yearling bull weighing about 1,200 pounds. I'd put him on a set of heifers. Well, if he wasn't a calving ease bull, I don't care how old he was, you were in trouble. So you really had no way of knowing what that bull's potential was until you tried him. And if it worked good, that's good, but if you went the other way, you had to pull a lot of calves. And so they finally, Angus Association finally come up with what they called a breeding value ratio. And that would be, really, it was just a place to start. It wasn't worth too much, but it was a place to start. And it wasn't very long, a year or two or three. They dropped the breeding value ratio and went to EPDs, expected progeny difference. And through the use, computers were coming in the picture too. And as this all happened, they become the EPDs for weaning weight, yearling weight, milk from the cow, and 2 or 3 different things would be put on the papers according to records that had been sent in from the different breeders all over the United States. And so the first thing that became the most valuable there was birth weight EPDs. One bull might have a birth weight EPD of, I'll just say 4.0. And here's another one, lighter birth weights, and according to records from his ancestors and so forth, he has a birth weight of -1. Well, if you're going to put him on heifers, much better to use the -1 rather than the +3. It's comparative. Those figures are comparative. And they're still not 100% effective, but that really helped not only the Angus breed, the other breeds have developed similar EPDs. And I remember that probably the EPDs probably came about in about 1970 maybe. And I know later, I can't remember when we started selling cattle at the OKT sale, which is Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas sale, held at Buffalo, Oklahoma every year. In fact, it's the oldest consignment sale in Oklahoma today. They've been at it about 75 years. But I started selling a few heifers up there and a few bulls, and this was after we came down here and got more into the meat of the business, you know. And so, of course, we have a board of directors, and first thing I knew, I'm on the board of directors, and as they changed from the breeding value ratio to the EPDs, 1 or 2 of the old breeders, oh, I'm not going to mess with that, you know. They just didn't want to be bothered with it, and eventually they just went out of the registered business. I mean, just went commercial, because the EPD thing really helped the breed. So, and like I say, I compliment the American Angus board of directors for that. Plus, then everyone knows about. Everyone knows, but I forget what I'm trying to say.
Ultrasound.
No. Well, it'll come to me. Anyway, I'll stop there and see it.
Well, you have a yearly sale on your property.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. How long has that been going on?
We started that in 1996. Well, we started the building. First sale was in 1997. And I've told several people since then, I said, you don't want to ever have your first sale, because that's a tough one. But after that, it's gotten better and better and better every year. We're not big in numbers, you know. We need to have about 100 head in the sale to justify all the advertising, the catalogs, and all the things that you have to do, regardless of how many head you have in that sale. And we were hitting 100, 105, or 10, but when the drought hit again about 1911, we started dropping down our numbers, and so we're scrambling more or less to get 90 head in our sale now. We're gradually getting there, but you can cut your numbers down a lot faster than you can build them back up if you're trying to build them from your own herd. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we were with Dale having his cattle and my cattle. It seemed like you could only sell so many bulls private treaty, and you'd end up keeping several more longer and longer and longer. And bulls have this characteristic: when they go to getting 2 years old, they do a lot of fighting between themselves. So you end up a lot of injuries, and they'll tear up a steel ball if you let them play with it long enough. So we discussed this thing, and of course we're ready for it. So we decided to start the sale, which meant we had to build a barn. And so Henry Gardner up at Ashland, Kansas, I was pretty good friends with him, and they had their sale going. Of course, they're very successful. And so I kind of visited him some, and he said, I have the plans of all of our pens and facilities, and he said, I'll give you anything you need to help you in setting up your facilities. And that helped a bunch. And so we tore down a building or two out there and leveled off the ground and put up a sale barn. We call it sale barn, but it's useful for half a dozen other things. So you know, it's been a good investment. The fellow that I knew that was an auctioneer, I had worked with him with the sale at OKT at Buffalo since I was actually I was the manager of that for about 9 years, so I got a lot of experience that helped me in our own sale. We don't hire a sale manager. We'd already learned enough. We thought we could handle it, and we have been able to. Anyway, Jerry Lehman from Missouri was the auctioneer up there at that time, and so I approached him about, you know, coming down, looking at our cattle, and consider being an auctioneer for our sale, and he accepted it. So he's auctioned every sale 21 years now. I don't know how much longer he'll keep doing that, but does a good job. And we, you know, if you're in the purebred business, you have to advertise, like a lot of business. But you know, the normal for farmers, you know, worry about advertising. They just produce. Mm-hmm. But when you get in this business, you have to advertise. If you don't, you're not going to attract the buyers that you need. So that spurred us. We've learned a lot in that area. And again, being on the managing and being on the board of OKT previous to this helped me have connections and, you know, kind of do things the right way. But and we print a sale book like I have over here. And over the years, we've developed a list of people we send this book to. And I don't know the exact number, but we send out about 1,200 sale books every year to different people. And that's all hand. We did that by hand the first year or two, and boy, that was a job. We finally learned how to handle that through the printer at Oklahoma City, and the lady who does our sale book itself lives in Tuttle, Oklahoma. Can't call her name. Jill.
Pruitt.
Otterstadt, I think, is the last name.
That's right.
Used to be Pruitt, and I used to do a lot of handwork, from on notebook paper, getting all this stuff together and right. And as of last year, the last 2 years now, Dale, of course, he has that computer knowledge because he grew up with that. Between him and Jill, I didn't do anything as far as, it's out of my hand.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
How many buyers come?
We'll have about 160 people here.
Wow.
We feed a free lunch, good lunch. And we'll have about 160 people come. Actual buyers for a sale will probably run from 35 to 50 that it will be buyers. And this last sale with, the cattle market was at its top last year. And we figured we'd topped. So I figured we're going to go down this time. Well, it just turned out that this year's sale was better than last year. We had our highest average this time.
Why do you think that was?
Well, basically, you have buyers that come maybe once every other year, 3 years, and they're good buyers. They'll buy the top bulls. This year, 3 of those people were here the same year. So here's these 3 people wanting the same cattle, and it was fun. I think our first 16 bulls averaged over $10,000, which that's never happened before. And then we had some lower end bulls that, people are a little more knowledgeable now, I guess. They're learning to study what information you have in there, and so they can go in the direction that they feel like they want to go, rather than just kind of a haphazard. And of course, you still have to consider what that animal looks like, visual appearance. And so, bulls we use through the AI program, that's always in my mind, is selecting bulls that we can use here that'll be the kind of bulls that our buyers like. And like I say, these 3, there was some other people here too, good buyers, that pretty much repeat buyers from the last few years. We'll attract a few new ones every year, and one thing that's always bugged me is I'd advertise in New Mexico. We could never drag them out here. I think we had one New Mexico buyer back a few years ago, and so I just quit advertising out there. The guy with the New Mexico stockman called me, and I finally told him, I said, we've been trying for all these years, and we're just not getting buyers from New Mexico. And he said, well, I understand. So I just quit advertising in their magazines. Your advertising can become quite a bill.
Oh yeah.
And you have to pay attention to that according to the cattle you're selling. I don't know if I mentioned a week ago they had this beef marketing conference at Canadian through the Hemphill County Extension. and they wanted to have one day at a ranch, so they wanted to come up here, and and we had between 85 and 100 people, and there was at least three different people from New Mexico. So I'm thinking in the back of my mind, if we can attract those three, that would be a plus, to pull them in. Hopefully they liked what they saw and will come back. But that's typically dry country out there. So a lot of it just depends on what kind of a year they have and what they want to spend for bulls. We will vary from, say, $3,000 as a low dollar to the top bull we sold this time brought $15,000. There was 5 or 6 of them brought a little over 10, which that was a first. We averaged $6,484, I think is what it was, on the bulls this year. And we sell open females primarily, heifers, and they averaged right under 2,000. Where last year, I think they averaged 2,900. But the market for the female thing is, with the downplay in the market now, it affects all that.
Gosh, that's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah.
Well, do you have retirement in your future?
I doubt it. But I might add, talking about the cattle, the second year we had the sale, that's when ultrasound came available. And so we have ultrasounded all our sale cattle ever since that second year. And so that gives you some more information.
Mm-hmm.
Then here we are about 3 or 4 years ago, DNA came to the front. So to start out with, we DNA'd heifers that we wanted to keep for replacement, I think 4 years ago and then 3 years ago. Then we decided, the way things are going, just DNA all the calves and get all this information stacked on them. So we're doing that now.
The science has become very important.
Oh yeah, it's just like I say, back not too many years ago, what you walked out there and looked at them, and that's what you saw is what you got. Now you got all these, you got about 30 different traits that you can study and try to figure out which ones would, which direction you need to be. And my thinking at this point is that as a breeder, you have a responsibility to be putting the breed where it ought to be for everybody in general. And so all this information, you try to look at it and analyze it, and then select bulls to use to keep you going in that direction. And one of those things that I think is very important is the marbling of the meat. That's one of the primary things that determines how they grade. And so most of our buyers do not feed cattle in the feedlot. A lot of them wean the calves off, maybe go right straight to town to a sale barn. Some of them maybe run them through until they're yearlings and then sell. But someday, someplace along the way, that animal's going to go to slaughter. And so if that marbling characteristic is there to keep supplying a steak that everyone likes, then that's where we need to kind of keep pushing for that. We don't go whole hog for that, you know, but that's where I kind of look at that and start with that, and then work it in with all these other characteristics. Another factor that's brought in there as well as the marbling is the size of the ribeye. Well, my way of thinking is, you know, who wants an 18-inch steak, a ribeye steak? That's a lot of meat.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're going to cut it in two and split it between two people.
Yeah.
That's the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
So getting the biggest ribeye in the world is not my desire, but to have the right, about a 14, 15-inch ribeye, and keep that marbling up there where it's a good juicy steak. And in the cattle feeding, which we haven't fed a lot of cattle, we have fed at different times, and I fed enough on Oklahoma beef. What do they call it? Steer feed out program.
Mhm.
We fed on that. Texas Ranch to Rail. A few years, American Angus put one on called Certified Angus Beef Program out of Oldsburg, Kansas. We fed bulls in those places because they're steers, not bulls. They're fed all the way through, and then they slaughter them, and so you get all this information back, and it kind of helps you to see where you're at, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know the carcass is what you end up with, which goes to make meat for the table, and so, and then again I just compliment the American Angus Association and the people who have been directors for the last 30 years, that they have really, well, they've made Angus a household word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a few years ago, you could maybe said Angus, and what's that? But I think everybody knows what Angus is, at least a black cow. Maybe they might think it's a Holstein-looking cow.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, it's just it's interesting, put it that way.
Lots of changes in your time.
Yeah.
Lots
yeah.
of changes. Well, going back to your time at OSU, you know, you were busy quite a bit taking care of your cattle. Did you do anything for fun? Anytime?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, going back to the cooks and dishwashers, we'd go to pool hall. We could play pool for less money than anything else you did.
Where did you play pool at?
There was I think they called it swims. It was the pool hall was on the second floor up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
I know where it is. Yes.
They had a bunch of pool and snooker tables, you know, and so us four guys, we'd go up there and play snooker all evening for less money than you could even go to picture show for, which the picture show was not very high at that time.
You wouldn't go downstairs and dance?
No, not there. I don't think at that time I think it was kind of a drugstore at that time.
Okay.
But it didn't take much to entertain, you know, little farm kids. Well, in square dancing, that got to be one of my particular ones too. We went to square dance deals at Kansas City, Kansas, and Oklahoma City, and Ponca City, and probably OSU. We probably was 5 or 6 couples that did quite a bit, you know, and so we had a great time square dancing. And you know, I don't know. if we didn't, we'd go to picture show some, you know, that's, if you call that entertainment.
Sure. What was homecoming like back then?
Homecoming at OSU or Oklahoma A&M. Yeah, it was all right. I was in at that time. All the boys had to be in ROTC. So I think of the homecoming parade. We'd march from up on campus clear downtown and through the parade ground, then back up. You know, it'd be hot. But I don't know how many times. Well, I guess once a year for homecoming. But I don't remember nothing like it is now. We went over, well, we went over to a football game because our granddaughter's in the OSU band. So we took in one of the games, and man, all the little, what do you call them? People tailgate.
Oh yeah.
Parties? Oh, my word.
Oh,
Yes.
That blew my mind. I'd never seen anything like that. It wasn't that. Didn't have that much notoriety, I guess.
Well, speaking of sporting events, when you were a student, did you go to any?
I didn't go to too many football games. They were on a Saturday afternoon because they didn't have lights at that time. And with my cattle out there in the place, I always had fence work I needed to do. So a lot of times on Saturdays I'd go out there and work on fence, you know, just because I had to. I enjoyed the basketball games probably and went to them more than I did football. And I mentioned the military part of it. I enjoyed that, really did. And I don't know, if I hadn't been hooked up with cattle responsibilities, I probably would have went into advanced officer training. But the way things turned out is a good thing I did not, because graduated in '56. My dad had a heart attack that fall before. Then we come out to Fargo. Fortunately, it was close to home, within 25 miles. And my dad died in November of the heart attack. My brother's in the Army and on the ship going to Germany. There my mom is with 15 or 20 cows to milk, and feeding stock cattle in several different places. And so I was able to hold down the job and at the same time keep things running over there until we got my brother back out of the service in April, I think it was April or May. And we'd been in the drought, that in 1957, February, it came a blizzard that stopped everything.
Wow.
And fortunately, it came on a Friday night, and we were over at the farm, or I'd have been 25 miles away and no way to get back there. So, but that seemed to break the drought. Our oldest son was born in June, and the night he was born, we were in a hospital overshadowed. Seemed to me like all night. And lightning and thunder and boom and rain and rain and rain. 5+ inches. And Wolf Creek got out of its banks that night, took the bridge out north of the town of Fargo, took it out 2 days later, I guess it was. And but that seemed to break the drought. I know different ones in the Fargo area, farmers, they'd been through the drought, couldn't raise any wheat. Well, they came out with a variety that was absolutely drought-proof. I can't think what they called it. So a bunch of guys planted that particular seed. And we got all that snow and all that rain, and that stuff grew up, got so tall,
Wow.
and the seed was kind of like little mouse turds. Wouldn't weigh 40 pounds. You know, it was an absolute disaster. Of course, I wasn't in the farming business, but my people were. And I'll never forget that. They thought they had the answer to the drought, but it didn't work when it turned wet.
Well, when you look back on your time at Oklahoma A&M, how did attending college in Stillwater impact your life?
Oh yeah, you know, that was just part of the life, and maybe it was more so because I moved cattle over there. I don't know. If I'd just been in school and not had to worry and contend with the cattle operation, probably, well, I know it would have been different, but it's just a part of life. Part of life that we just dealt with it.
Are there many OSU alums in this part of Oklahoma?
Yeah, quite a few, and there's quite a few in Canadian Texas. Yeah,
really?
and Follett, Texas, to the north. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Canadian, I think they kind of have an organized OSU. We've never been involved in it.
Yeah.
And two good friends I had that I met in school came back to the Follett area. Of course, they've been bull customers too. So yeah, there's quite a few OSU people. Yeah.
You know, when talking to alums, we find that OSU and A&M alumni are very loyal to the university. Why do you feel that could be?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe because we don't want to be an OU grad.
Very true.
Yeah, I think people that went to school at OSU, yeah, they are loyal. Yeah. But now, like ourselves, we haven't went back and forth to a lot of games, that sort of thing. It just doesn't fit with. I mean, that's hard to do.
Especially, yeah.
But we have a friend or two up here towards Shattuck that I think they go to every basketball game. I don't know how to do it. And the veterinarian up there that we do business with now, he's with a group. He and his wife are with a group that they have seats and everything, you know, and so they kind of rotate it of a sort. But yeah, I'd say our OSU's big time here.
Well, what have I left out? What have I missed? What else would you like to add before we close out today? We've done a quick tour through your life.
Well, I don't know what to add to it. I probably left out some things and said some things unnecessary. At this beef conference we had, they wanted me to, tell about our place and all this, kind of like today. And I thought later, some of the stuff I said, they probably couldn't care less. And I had prepared some notes the day before, and then that morning I couldn't find them. So I said, well, what you hear is just off the cuff, because I misplaced my notes. But I guess I've enjoyed what we've done. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change going back to college, the same high school. I said I probably had too much fun in high school. I enjoyed things we did. And when we wanted to have a 50-year reunion, we got on the phone, called guys that we hadn't seen or heard of, and I called this one guy, and I said I didn't have any fun in high school. I wouldn't come to the thing. I thought, well, wow, I had a good time in high school, and I enjoyed my classmates and people that I met in college. There was 4 of us, and 5 of us, counting myself, in Ag Ed, kind of together. And, you know, we just got to be pretty good buddies. And like everything else, one of them's gone now, and one's in a home for Alzheimer's. I guess there were just 4 of us. And anyway, the other one lives over by Tacoma, Oklahoma. Been a good farmer. He said, well, now we're the only 2 left. But I enjoy people. When I taught VOAG, I've taught 9 years, so I had quite a number of boys. There was no girls at that time in Ag. But they've been good friends, the ones that have stayed around where I see them every now and then, you know, we're just good friends, and some of them have been customers. So I don't guess I'd change anything I've done. Made a few mistakes, of course, you know, but as a whole, we've been very fortunate, very blessed. This has been a good place. It's been a productive place, and allowed us to, you know, we've had to work, but it's allowed us to kind of pursue what we like to do. And what more could you ask? You know, we both of us have good health, and are still able to do that. I want to do less and less, but my son's getting more and more, and so I have to keep up with him. We're just completing artificial breeding about 125 to 50 cows, and he's now interested in doing embryo transfer, which I never did want to get into that. But now he's wanting to do that, so instead of doing less, I probably am doing more because I just have to keep up with what's going on. But we've never hurt ourselves. We just kind of work at it. And after the sale every year, we think, well, we'll go someplace for a day or 2. That's our vacation times, little mini vacations. This year we didn't get away, did we?
Went up to Wichita shortly.
But yeah, it's been good. You
And
know,
don't forget you've got a granddaughter at OSU, and another one going next year,
yeah,
and another one the next year.
yeah, right. I have a granddaughter there, a freshman, and
In the
And
cowboy band.
she got in the cowboy band. In fact, she would not have went to OSU had it not been for that, because that helped her financially, you know. And
She loved it.
she has done great. Just loved it.
Just loved it.
And then another granddaughter is graduating from Medford. She plans to go next year. Then Dale's youngest daughter, she'll be a senior in high school this year. At this point in time, she has her mind set to go to OSU and pursue the field of genetics.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Keep them coming.
yeah,
Keep them coming.
Yeah.
It's a good family tradition.
yeah, right.
Even though your one son went to Texas Tech, it's okay.
They fit pretty good together.
Well, we definitely appreciate your time. They do fit together very well. Your time today. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your life and your business here on the ranch, and thanks for sharing some memories of Ellis County.
Thank you for the opportunity. Probably didn't tell some things I ought to tell, and probably told some things I shouldn't have, but
You were great. You were great.